First of all, I want to apologise for the quality of this video because I'm filming it off my MacBook. Usually I use the iPad, which is really good quality, but my boyfriend has it and he's on his way home, but I just thought it was better to film now while it's quiet. So yeah, I got a comment this morning saying, "You seem to be writing this book," meaning Rebellion, "in first person present tense point of view. Would you be so kind to do a video on your literary style and authorial choices? Ask and you shall get." So yeah, so this is why I make certain choices in which POV I use, basically. So if you don't know about Rebellion, it's written in first person present tense. And it's from the perspective of a character called Cassia, who is 17 years old, and she is trying to fight against an oppressive regime. Basically, the reason I chose first person was because I wanted it to be like a diary. For me, that was quite important because I wanted you to feel like you were a 17-year-old experiencing this occupation. And so that's why I chose first person. When I first wrote it, it was in first person past tense. And when I handed it over to my editor, she read it and she said, "I think it would really work if it was in present tense because it makes it more immediate." And I completely agreed with her because I thought, you know what? This is high action, intense stuff. Let's feel like we're there in the moment and then we'll really feel what's going on, and it just kind of amps things up a little bit. So although it wasn't what I originally wrote it in, I think it was really good that Cressida pointed that out to me because I think it really added something. It isn't the easiest to write in. I find personally present tense quite difficult to write in because naturally I write in past tense. So it makes editing a nightmare, as my proofreader will tell you. So that's why Rebellion's like that. Now, Resistance is different, which is the second book in the series. So it's not out yet, it's out in July, but I'll tell you about how it's done. So Cassia is still first person present, but there is a new voice in it, it's a new character, and she is in third person present. Now the reason she's in third person present is because Cassia's in the present tense, and when they meet, it needs to be, because of the way the scenes work, the way the chapters work, they need to be in the same tense, if that makes sense. And writing in third person present tense, it was a bit of a nightmare, but I kind of had to do it. And then to make matters more confusing, there's a third voice who pops up, which is the voice of another character. I don't want to spoil, I don't know if it is a bit of a spoiler for Rebellion, I don't know how much of spoilers people want, but there's another character who pops up from Rebellion and they are in third person past, and that again is because of the way that their chapters interlink and it has to be reflective of what happened. So it's quite confusing, and I know that probably sounds like when you're reading it, you're like, what? It's all jumping around, but it works. It's complicated, but it works. Ideally, I would write in third person past tense. It's the easiest way to write. And also, if you're not writing just as one character, if you're writing the voice of God, basically, you have so much more scope. But at the same time, always limit yourself, because you risk, when you're the voice of God, of being too much of a know-it-all and telling people too much stuff and telling people what characters are doing rather than showing it. So I think it's really important when you're choosing what voice to do that you pick your limits. So for instance, I'm currently writing a book and it's third person past tense, but it's a tricky style because it is kind of like that, because it's a retelling, I'm kind of adopting a slightly different style, and that it is kind of a bit of a know-it-all narration, if that makes sense. But at the same time, I feel it's important to limit it, because you have to be careful with how much you're putting across, because otherwise you become that sort of omnipotent, a bit smug narration, and you don't want that. So yeah, for me, I suppose when it comes to authorial, yeah, that's the right word, choices, it comes down to the book. Cassia, I wanted it to be like a diary, hence first person, and I wanted people to feel what it was like to be young in that experience, because there's obviously a sense of naivety about what's going on. Like at the beginning of the book, she's still crushing on her best friend, and she's kind of like rebelling a little bit, but like in not very significant ways, and just kind of clinging on to her life before and not realizing the huge impact of this occupation on her country. And it needed to be first person so that you could see the character progression throughout the story and how she grows. And I mean, it's a coming of age, basically. And then also another time that I've chosen to do first person is in called Queen. But in that, sometimes when you write first person, you have the option to be an unreliable narrator. So you have the choice of how the story goes from their perspective. So they are always going to say that they're making the right decision and that what they're choosing is wonderful. And you, as the reader, have to be like, hang on a second. And that's great, because that adds another layer to it, because as a reader, you're like, okay, I kind of get where you're coming from, but at the same time, like, really? So that's quite fun to play with in a first person's perspective. So that's quite an interesting choice sometimes. I think sometimes for psychological thrillers, it's a good choice to make. Other voices I've used, so I've got another novel that I am querying at the moment, and it's a superhero novel, and that is in third person past, but the way it's written, let me just drink from my pulled up mug. But the way it's written is that it adopts different voices. So there's two main voices. There's the female and the male. So the female voice has a certain tone to it, even though it's in the third person past. And then the male chapters have a certain voice to it. So he's very arrogant, so that comes across in the chapters. And she is kind of a little bit tough, just kind of like no bullshit, and bit of a party girl, and that comes across in the chapters. So just because you're writing in third person and past tense doesn't mean that you can't adopt the tone of that character. So don't feel that it limits you in that respect. So yeah, I don't know if that's of any help. I've probably just rambled a little bit, but for every book, basically, the choice is different. I make the choice before I start writing, because it, for instance, with Rebellion, changing it from present to past is just a pain. I mean, I was lucky that my editor did it for me, but it is a pain, and it's not something you want to have to go back and do. So when you're coming up with your idea, or when you're planning your idea, it depends how you work, I think you need to choose how you're going to write it first, because it is actually really significant to how the book pans out. and it's something that I always think about before I start. Sometimes it comes naturally as well, you know, you just start writing and it's just there already. And that's because the voice is so strong already, because the idea is strong. So just go with your instinct, I think, on these things. I think it does help you. I hope that helps. I hope that was clear. I don't know. And yes, I am sitting on the floor. I'm not with my plants and yeah. So please ask me questions, because it gives me material to do more videos, because I don't do enough videos. So I love to hear from you, and anything you want to know, please ask, and hopefully I will give clearer answers than this one.